Watch a child play. No agenda, no productivity metric, no 5-year plan, just play. Pure, spontaneous, joyful expression. Now here's a thought that might break your brain. What if that's exactly what God is doing with the entire universe? What if creation isn't a serious project with deadlines and performance reviews? What if suffering isn't a mistake and joy isn't a reward? What if all of it, birth, death, triumph, tragedy, you, me, this moment right now, is divine play? In Sanskrit, there's a word for this, Leela. And understanding it might completely change how you see your life. The divine play, Lila. Why your life might be God's favorite game. Before we dive into Lila, we need context. Because this isn't just some random spiritual concept I picked up at a retreat. This comes from one of the oldest continuous spiritual traditions on Earth, the Vedic tradition. We're talking about wisdom that goes back somewhere between 1500 to 1200 BCE, possibly earlier. The Vedas themselves, the foundational sacred texts of what we now call Hinduism, were transmitted orally for centuries before being written down. Think about that. While other civilizations were just figuring out written language, sages in ancient India were already contemplating the nature of consciousness, reality, and the ultimate questions of existence. The word Veda literally means knowledge. Not just any knowledge, sacred knowledge. Knowledge of the real. There are 4 main Vedas. The Rig Veda, the oldest, filled with hymns to various deities. The Sama Veda, melodies and chants for rituals. The Yajur Veda, instructions for sacrificial rites. The Atharva Veda, spells, charms, and practical wisdom. But here's where it gets interesting. Each Veda has layers, like archaeological layers of thought. First, you have the Samhitas, the hymns and mantras. Then the Brahmanas, ritual instructions and explanations. Then the Aranyakas, the forest texts for hermits and contemplatives. And finally, the Upanishads, the philosophical crown jewels. The Upanishads, composed roughly between 800 and 500 BCE, mark a massive shift. A shift from external ritual to internal realization, from pleasing the gods to understanding the nature of reality itself. This is where concepts like Brahman, ultimate reality, Atman, individual soul, Maya, illusion, karma, action and consequence, Dharma, duty, righteousness, cosmic order, and moksha, liberation, were explored in depth. And this is where we first encounter the idea of Lila, the divine play. So what exactly is Lila? The word literally translates to play, sport, or pastime. But it's not just any play. It's divine play, cosmic play. The universe as God's creative expression, not out of need, but out of pure, spontaneous joy. This creative activity of the divine is called Lila, the play of God, and the world is seen as the stage of the divine play. Fritjof Capra, the Tao of Physics. Let me say that again. Not out of need. God doesn't create because something's missing. God doesn't create to fix a problem or achieve an outcome. God creates the way a child plays, because that's the nature of infinite consciousness. Freedom, spontaneity, joy. Think about it this way. Why does a musician improvise? Why does a painter paint? Why does a dancer dance? Not because they have to, because the creative impulse is alive in them, because expression is their nature. Now scale that up, infinitely. Brahman, the ultimate reality, the source of everything, is not some static, frozen deity sitting on a throne judging your every move. Brahman is dynamic, creative, playful, and all of this, galaxies, planets, life forms, your heartbreak, your joy, your Monday morning commute, is Brahman playing. Capra again. Brahman is the great magician who transforms himself into the world and then performs this feat with his magic creative power, which is the original meaning of Maya in the Rig Veda. Wait, did you catch that? Maya originally didn't mean illusion in the sense of fake. It meant God's creative power, the magic that makes the play possible. Over centuries, the meaning shifted. Maya became the spell, the hypnotic identification with the forms of the play instead of recognizing the player behind it all. Here's the teaching. All forms are Maya, temporary, fluid, ever-changing. But as long as we mistake the forms for ultimate reality, as long as we forget the unity underlying everything, we're under the spell. We're so absorbed in the movie that we forget we're watching a movie. Leela is the reminder. You're not just a character in the play. You are the play. You are the player. Now, different schools of Hindu philosophy interpret Leela slightly differently. In Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualistic school, Leela is Brahman's self-expression. The universe is Brahman playing hide-and-seek with itself, forgetting its true nature just so it can experience the joy of remembering. You are Brahman, temporarily pretending to be a limited individual. And awakening is the moment you stop pretending. In Vaishnavism, the devotional traditions centered on Vishnu and Krishna, Leela takes on a more personal flavor. Krishna's adventures in Vrindavan with the cowherd girls, the gopis, are seen as divine play. His mischievousness as a child stealing butter, his romantic dances with Radha, his heroic battles in the Mahabharata. All of it is Leela. But here's what's beautiful about the Vaishnava interpretation: participation. Devotees don't just intellectually understand Leela. They enter it. Through devotion, through visualizing Krishna's play, through reenactment in ritual dramas called Ras Leela and Ram Leela, they become part of the divine play themselves. They taste what it's like to be a player in God's game instead of just a spectator. One of the most powerful images from Krishna's story is the Rasa dance, where Krishna multiplies himself so that each gopi thinks she is dancing with him alone. It's a metaphor for divine love. God is intimate with each soul individually. The play is both universal and deeply personal. Now here's where some people get stuck. If life is divine play, what about suffering? What about the child who starves? The person who loses everyone they love? The injustice, the cruelty, the senseless pain. Calling that play feels offensive, wrong, like spiritual bypassing at its worst. And you're right to feel that way. This is the question that's haunted spiritual seekers for millennia. The Divine Mother is full of bliss. Creation, preservation, and destruction are the waves of her sportive pleasure. Sri Ramakrishna. A devotee responded, "It may be her sweet will, but it is death to us." And Sri Ramakrishna's answer? "But who are you? It is the Divine Mother who has become all this. It is only as long as you do not know her that you say, I. Here's what that means. The suffering you experience is real. Absolutely real in the relative realm. Your grief is not fake. Your pain is not imaginary. But the separate you who suffers, that's the illusion. When you identify as a separate individual, cut off from the whole, of course suffering feels personal. Of course it feels like something is happening to you. But what if you are not separate from the divine? What if you are the consciousness playing all the roles? The victim, the villain, the hero, the bystander. You're a wave in the ocean asking, "Why is this wave next to me so much bigger?" But you're both ocean and the wave. The waveness is temporary. The oceanness is eternal. Now I know how this sounds. It can sound like, just transcend your ego and you won't suffer anymore. And that's technically true, but it's also missing the point. Because you're still in a body. You're still having a human experience. And that human experience includes real pain. Leela doesn't ask you to deny that. It asks you to hold a paradox. Yes, this hurts. And yes, this is also divine play. Both are true. Simultaneously. Okay. Philosophy is beautiful. But how do you actually live this? How does understanding Lila change your Tuesday afternoon when you're stuck in traffic and late for a meeting? Let me share what shifted for me. 1. Lightness. When I remember that life is play, I stop taking it so damn seriously. Not in a nihilistic way, not in a nothing matters way, but in a this moment is part of a larger game I can't fully see way. I still show up, I still care, I still work hard, but I'm not carrying it all like it's life or death, because it's not. It's play. 2. Creativity over control. Play is improvisational. It's responsive. It flows. When I try to control everything, I'm not playing. I'm white-knuckling my way through a script I wrote when I was 20. But when I see life as Lila, I ask, what wants to emerge through me right now? Not, how do I force this outcome? That's the shift from ego-driven action to flow. From, I need this, to, let's see what happens. 3. Compassion for the play. If everyone is Brahman playing different roles, if the person who hurt you and the person who healed you are both expressions of the same divine consciousness, how can you hold on to hate? I'm not saying you have to like everyone. I'm not saying you shouldn't have boundaries. But there's a softening that happens when you realize we're all in this play together, and most of us have forgotten we're playing. 4. Wonder instead of dread. Before Lila, I used to wake up and think, ugh, another day, more problems, more stress. Now, I'm curious. What's today's scene in the play? What role am I playing? What's the universe up to? That curiosity changes everything. Because suddenly, I'm not a victim of life. I'm a participant. And here's the wildest part. When you start living like this, when you stop clinging so desperately to outcomes, when you start treating challenges as part of the game instead of evidence that you're failing, life actually becomes more playful. Not easier, not problem-free, but lighter, more alive, more like the joyful creativity it was always meant to be. Now here's the paradox, and it's a big one. Leela doesn't mean carelessness. Watch a child play. They're completely engaged, building that sandcastle with total focus, protecting their team in tag like it's life or death. The play is serious. The stakes feel real in the moment. And then the game ends, and they move on. No existential crisis, no identity collapse. That's the art, to play fully, to care deeply, to be in the game without being trapped by it. The Bhagavad Gita says it beautifully. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. In other words, act. But don't attach your worth to the outcome. Play the game. But remember, it's a game. This is why Leela isn't passive. It's not an excuse to check out or stop trying. It's an invitation to engage more fully, but from a place of freedom instead of fear. So here's where we land. Your life, every triumph, every heartbreak, every mundane Tuesday, is Leela. Divine play, Brahman expressing itself through you as you. You are not a mistake. You are not behind. You are not doing it wrong. You are exactly what consciousness looks like when it plays this particular game. And when you remember that, when you stop mistaking the character for the player, you don't escape life. You don't transcend pain. You don't suddenly float above it all in blissful detachment. You participate more fully because you're no longer afraid of losing. You play joyfully, courageously, creatively. Because that's what you are. That's what everything is. The universe isn't happening to you. The universe is happening as you. And it's playing. Welcome to the game. If this resonated, let's see how many of us are remembering we're players, not just characters. And if you want more explorations of ancient wisdom meeting modern life, subscribe. Because we're just getting started. One last thing. That stress you're carrying about whether you understood this correctly, that need to get it right, that's the ego. Still trying to turn play into work. Notice it, smile at it, and get back to playing.